Well, it is episode 103 of Fancy Ramen. My name is Neil.
And I'm Scott.
And today it's January 20th, which if you are looking at your timestamp on when you downloaded this episode or when it was uploaded to YouTube, it should be fairly shorter because that means we've finally started to catch up with some of the backlog we had at the start of the year. And that is probably the only non-game related thing I did this week. So what about you, Scott?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm trying to think what I did besides try and resist the irresistible urge to empty out my apartment into the black hole that is the zeitgeist of Marie Kondo's cleaning up or whatever. Do you know anything about that out of curiosity? We may have talked about it previously on the podcast when Cookie's wife was going through their house, tossing out old stuff because she had just finished reading Marie Kondo's book.
I don't know if we did it on camera, so to speak, or on microphone.
On mic. Okay. Well, if this is the first time we're putting it on wax, then I'll give a very quick description, which is Marie Kondo. I know nothing about her, and I'm going to go off the dome as opposed to do any sort of research or understand her background. Marie Kondo is a Japanese woman who loves mess and filth and eradicating it with a pinpoint approach of taking each item that she encounters and determining, does this item that I am currently holding spark joy? And if no, she casts it into the bottomless abyss of whatever garbage heap is nearest by. Or maybe she donates it. She might be a little bit better about it. But either way, she banishes it from her home, never to be seen again. And she wrote a book about this, which I think the book honestly could be relatively one page, but I believe it's a little bit thicker than that, probably about 100 times thicker. But the basic principle is determining all the things that you own, the things that are around you in your living space, and assessing their worth in a, does this bring me life format instead of, would it be functional or useful for me to have a backup hat just in case my other hat gets destroyed and I need one? So I'm not following exactly the Marie Kondo principles, but I tried to do that around my apartment this weekend with maybe less zeal than she has in both her book and her Netflix television show or series that I think a lot of people are currently watching and flooding Goodwills with. But it was nice. I threw out a bunch of stuff, and I actually did encounter the conundrum of, I have a hat that I really like, but should I keep a backup hat just in case I lose said great hat?
Well,
and the answer I came...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the answer I came to was keeping the backup hat, because at this point, I've probably filled 3 trash bags full of items to donate, and a couple other miscellaneous items that are too big to actually put in a trash bag, or it's kind of useless, like an old 10-watt bass practice amp that I don't need anymore because I have a 40-watt amp that is much better.
Yeah, that needed to go.
It really did. It mostly just buzzed. I don't even know if it made sound as much as just plugged into an electrical socket and vibrated at a frequency close to what my string would play.
It's funny that you mention all this because I actually went through the same process on Friday or Saturday, and it's still a work in progress, but no joke that I could not see the floor for half of this basement, and now everything is visible and in boxes, and there's 3 extremely large bags of trash that are waiting to be dumped in the garage now as well.
I can tell it's a lot cleaner because I too can see your floor for the first time on our Discord video chat. But also, you even unburied your silent producer's dad, who I haven't seen in the background in quite some time. It looks like he's up and moving for the first time in what has to be months. Was he okay? Did you have to hydrate him once you?
Well, an IV and then some flapjacks, and we're good to go. So is this process like shortened down to KonMari?
I thought that the woman who initiated this technique is Marie Kondo. Yeah.
At least I'm seeing it
Marie
on
Kondo.
Reddit. Like it's got its own
She's
subreddit.
a Japanese consultant. Okay.
It's now the subreddit is KonMari, or for Marie Kondo, like kind of like how anime or manga with ridiculously long names end up getting shortened down. I think that's kind of what's happened here. So people talk about the KonMari method.
KonMari method. Kondo's method of organizing is known as the KonMari method and consists of gathering together all of one's belongings, one category at a time, and keeping only those things that spark joy. Tokimeku, the word in Japanese, means flutter, throb, palpitate, and choosing a place for everything from then on. So that's the other thing. Like, I kept a lot of things that did not make me flutter, palpitate, or even like have any sort of emotional response. But I did look at them and go, even though this does not instill joy in me, would it be really shitty if I went to go use this item later or find this and realize that I had completely disposed of it? I think my principle is better because I don't know if I would have any physical possessions left if I went by the butterflies in my stomach method as opposed to the, well, I do need to wear pants, don't I? Approach that I prefer. But it was a nice way, I guess, to start what was otherwise going to be a relatively uneventful weekend. And when I went to tackle the remaining stuff that I had holed up at my parents' place, because I don't have that much storage space in my apartment, I pretty much took everything I left with them and deposited it as well into a donation bag, only to find out that they were doing the exact same thing and already had 2 donation bags primed of what they had taken out of their house. So although I haven't read the book or watched the Netflix series, I think that this is like currently sweeping through the cultural zeitgeist of just like cleaning shit up and really minimizing our like possessions. And I'm waiting for the shopping at Goodwill to be really choice so I can build back up on all of the shit I've just thrown out.
While we're talking about the KonMari method, I kind of had some interesting choices to face too. And I also want to note too, it's crazy that you can go through all of your belongings and still not find the one thing that was like part of your reason to do the cleaning or sorting to begin with.
You were looking for something?
I kind of was. That was like a bonus to also being able. I guess like the full inspiration is that I've got this big sound console here that I won at an auction for a pretty low price. And I'm starting to come to terms with the fact that this sound console, which is like 24 channels, 36 channel or 32 channel frame, is just not going to get utilized by me right now. Like I haven't mixed an album or any music in like a 1.5 to 2 years. And that's really the only time something like that would be useful, aside from being a showpiece for any type of studio. And literally a showpiece as in like, look at this, it makes us look more professional. But we don't actually use it. We might fiddle with knobs and stuff to make you think we're using it, or we might use what we call the master section of the console, which is basically just at that point becomes a glorified volume knob and routing system for speakers. But then, like aside from that, that's probably what it would end up being if I continue to be in possession of this board and find the place to put it. But I was
really surprised that you led with that. With our Fancy Ramen Live. A program just about to come to fruition.
I definitely felt like I could just give it to someone else that would actually use it. And I've been asking around to see if I have any takers on it. And like, I can say this without any concern because the people that would be interested in this are probably not going to interested in the board are not going to be listening to this podcast most likely. But like, I just really would want a few $100s for it, or quite frankly, and then like, cause that's what the cost was. So I just basically want the cost back for it.
You want break even. Yeah.
I kind of wouldn't mind if someone would take this 300-pound console out on their own, and then I wouldn't charge anything for it. That's basically how I feel about it.
You want a very strong handshake if you're not going to get any sort of financial compensation for it.
I want multiple strong handshakes that would be comprised of the people that would lift and carry this console out of here, because it's like 300 something pounds. It is it's big and unwieldy, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to move around. But so the cleaning was basically a way to get ready for that process if I find the right buyer. But in addition to that, I also kind of organized the game collection and all that, and also came to realize that there's probably not a good way to have absolutely every piece of hardware I have hooked up to this computer neat without like a gross misuse of twist ties and whatnot. I think it's crazy. I have like so many peripherals now. There's so many consoles I've got. It's like I have no idea how else to make this a better setup aside from adding more monitors, like more computer monitors for different consoles. And like I kind of want to hook up my Windows XP computer to this crazy amalgamation as well, which wouldn't be too hard because that would be using, aside from another outlet, I would just have a VGA connection. But then part of me is like, well, how often am I really going to use Windows XP? Maybe once a year.
Yeah, it's not the version of Windows I would expect someone to be using on an active basis unless they're tied to equipment that is restricted to that being the most modern operating system it'll interact with.
Right. Yeah, that's all I really need to say about that. What else have you been up to this week?
Well, I got a raise at work, and what I wanted to do to display my newfound wealth was commit to an exorbitant purchase. And so I have finally joined the club of people who pay for some sort of subscription service. Before this, I have been able to work my contacts to get Hulu and Netflix and all these different streaming services from friends or family. You guys will never catch me.
Despite the advanced algorithm.
Yeah, this is how Netflix knows how many people watch Bird Box, even though it doesn't match their viewing numbers. I didn't watch Bird Box, but they can at least assume that on an account that's supposed to be for one person, it is actually for a family of 20 people. So they haven't caught me on that yet, but I think I've finally buckled. And yesterday I went ahead and spent the ridiculous price of, I think, $6.95 to get Crunchyroll's premium service. Except what's very interesting about this is I had already, the way that they have the establishment of their premium service is pretty interesting, because I could not find an option in which you just opt in to do it. Instead, what happens is you try premium for a 2-week period, and then they start to charge you if you don't withdraw from it. But I had already pulled the bullshit move of like knowing I was going to watch a lot of anime within a 2-week period and signed up for the free premium trial and then canceled out of it. So when I went to set up my card for it, it said that I had already tried the free premium trial, and it didn't give me the option to actually just pay for the premium service. So I had to take an alternative route and sign up with my PayPal account. But the PayPal account has activated another free trial for me under the same account for another 14 days. So I found the secret to getting 28 days out of the 14-day trial is to just keep alternating your payment methods. I don't think that if I were to go back and try the card again or the PayPal method, that it would work. So I think 28 is probably the maximum without suggesting a different card number. But once my 14 days are up, I plan on staying on the program this time and getting the premium service.
So in theory, you could just keep opening new credit cards.
Yeah, I think you just keep juggling new credit accounts. In this case, the second one, I used a PayPal instead of a credit card. So I don't know if it's the method of payment is different as well. But I found a way that you could at least get a full February month out of Crunchyroll for free before ever having to pay for any sort of service. Yeah, not bad. Crunchyroll, go ahead and contact me for my service fee of doing some white hat hacking. But yeah, I think that's about all I've been up to for the most part. I got for Scott's hockey update, I got the MVP award a second time in a row consecutively, making 3 for the year and further entrenching me with imposter syndrome.
Did you make a goal?
Still haven't made a goal. But man, I keep the pressure up. Yeah, I'm going to need to work on that. I'm bad enough of a shooter. I mean, we haven't played against any of these teams a second time. It's a whole lineup of the entire season is a different team pretty much every weekend. And so I'm able to pass as like a threatening wing because I'm always in position to score. And at least when I'm right in front of the goalies, like I don't think it's called the box. I'm not actually entirely sure. But I'm always about in the right place to score and just don't have the opportunity to really knock it in. And so what ends up happening is I get really close and threaten the other team, but they don't know how bad I am at actually trying to make a shot because for whatever reason, I cannot get the puck off the ground when I intend to, or when I go to deflect, I have no accuracy whatsoever. So I'm just keeping people on their toes, and that seems to be good enough.
I can dig it.
Yeah. That's all I've been up to. And I wish I could say I've done a lot of gaming, but I also haven't done too much of that. So I'd love to hear what you've been up to on the gaming end.
Well, the Suikoden 2 streams have been continuing. Upon viewer request, I think I'm going to up it to twice a week now. Saturday mornings, most likely, as well as Sunday. I'm only like maybe I'm 7 hours into Suikoden 2, and I am hard-pressed to think of a game where a direct sequel improves as much as Suikoden 2 does to 1. Like, and for very understandable reasons. Suikoden 1 was a success financially in Japan, and it was also a very low-budget game. So afterwards, they're like, oh, we could really... this is a PlayStation era 2D RPG. They kind of looked at that, and I think the story is that they saw the success of 1, and they're like, oh, there's still a market for 2D RPGs. Maybe we should actually put some time in this one. And they hired a quote-unquote more professional artist. They got additional help on the the music composition from other people in KonMari as well, which I think just further establishes Miki Higashino, the original composer's work, is even better with the help, I'm assuming, on arrangement and audio mixing and so forth. But just overall, the story, everything's written so much better. I'm excited to keep playing that game, and also excited to play the rest of the series from this point on. So just wanted to throw that much out there. I also streamed a little bit of Catherine Classic, the PC port, on hard, and I don't know if I've ever played it on hard before. That game is punishing. I think I'm on the second boss, or rather the second chapter at the boss, and I just don't know how to move forward. I think there are legitimately points in that game, in this cube climbing puzzle game, where if you pull something out wrong, or if the boss knocks down a row of blocks, you just legitimately cannot advance without the use of items. And you can only, unfortunately, use one item at a time, or hold on to one at a time, which basically creates you a freebie block, so you can usually get up things you couldn't otherwise get up. How
do you collect items? Is it in the dream world, or is it in the main part of the lucid version of the game?
You collect them during the dream, although you can technically enhance the way you climb by drinking during the night or during the day when you're awake. I think that's what it does.
Okay.
But it's been a blast to play that too. I'm hoping to start streaming some other games aside from just Suikoden, but it's kind of hard to have like a specific schedule aside from those mornings.
Mm-hmm.
The only other small thing to talk about before we talk about something that we both enjoyed was that I was watching John or Jay Frey all day, if you want to go to his Twitch, play Bloodborne. He's trying to platinum the game, and in doing so, it's gotten that itch a little bit back into me of wanting to go back and play some Bloodborne.
So I recently, I can't remember where I encountered this at, but it had been stated somewhere. I can't remember if this was a comment on Reddit or YouTube, or it was a thread on some forum, but it was that Bloodborne players should be happy that we don't have a sequel to Bloodborne, because it essentially preserves what was such a good experience with the original Bloodborne. And I was trying to sit down and think about that in comparison to other games that were critical successes that did their sequels, or even did additional games to form a trilogy really make them that much better. And I was having a really hard time deciding if there is anything better than the initial experience of Dark Souls 1.
You
that
played
is added to by 2 and 3, because I've played both 2 and 3, and I've played most of their DLC as well.
Did you not play Demon Souls?
I did not play Demon Souls. No, that was before. I wasn't aware of Dark Souls until it had actually already released like a year or two. I should say, Dark Souls had released about a year or two before I had ever heard of it. And I picked up the game Dark Souls in a friend's basement one time, where he had gotten the game, said, "This game kind of sucks. I'm not into it. If you want to try it, go for it." And I fought skeletons in the graveyard above the catacombs for like 4 hours, thinking, wow, this game really is hard. I don't know what I'm doing. And thus began the eternal love for games that are just like mean in how difficult they can be, especially when you don't know what you're doing at all and you're too stubborn to try a different approach or look for another path.
Do you think...
So I don't have the context of Demon Souls to Dark Souls, I guess, where Dark Souls would be what? A spiritual successor, a transition of the genre into a new, setting and storyline, but otherwise pretty much the same when it comes to gameplay and function. Because Demon Souls seems like it's the same thing as Dark Souls.
I think
right?
Maybe the biggest difference I can think of immediately, like aside from like some of the gameplay differences that you also experienced through 1, 2, and 3 regarding like guard breaking,
weapon arts, and
that sort of
the
stuff.
Amazing dual wielding of Dark Souls 2. That was the one thing that I was like, well, if it weren't for Dark Souls 2, we wouldn't have what is my favorite version of dual wielding, which is the two-handed, the single-handed dual greatsword build.
Yeah, that's true. The one critical difference I could think of, and maybe I'm wrong in this regard because I didn't play a whole lot of Demon Souls, and I played it after the fact too, would be that I think the game is more open. Like once you get to the hub, the game is kind of like, I'm trying to think of like a comparison that makes sense. Like Dark Souls 1 is similar in this way, but like there is like an optimal path that it kind of encourages you to go down just due to the sheer difficulty of areas that you can go to but shouldn't go to. And I think Demon Souls is maybe less than that. I would almost even say it's like Mega Man.
Oh.
Yeah, Breath of the Wild is probably a better comparison there.
Because you can go anywhere. Like you have the equipment or the tools to go anywhere. And the difficulty, I guess the difficulty in Breath of the Wild is how long it takes you to traverse the environment increases the difficulty of enemies. So it's like it's like Oblivion. Oblivion, I think, is a good example that if you're not playing the storyline and you're just navigating on the like overworld that is Tamriel, if I believe correctly, you can literally go in any direction and it's going to be roughly the same difficulty. The only difference is as you level up, you won't encounter goblins on the road anymore, but like straight up bears after level 10.
Demon lords when you're in the
demon
upper
lords
levels.
at level 20 who are just like walking the sidewalk.
Yeah, God, it's not even
it's
get me
terrible
started.
balancing. But it's the same basic principle where you're only burdened by a relatively similar amount of difficulty in any progression. And I do agree, Dark Souls, like you can try and fight Gravelord Nito right away, or at least you can try and make it to the Tomb of Giants, but is that feasible? I don't think so at all. Like those skeletons take 20 something hits with a non-upgraded weapon, and
Right.
That's just like you'll just get swarmed.
To answer your question though, or to go back to the legacy versus sequel, if you will,
Yeah.
conversation, maybe the best answer is that once you get enough games out, no one even cares about bad installments in your game. Because why I mentioned Mega Man was because that was one thing that came to my mind of like, well, there are 11 Mega Man games out now in the main series, 4
There's
out
so
in
many
the
others,
X series, and a bunch of spin-offs. And it's like, no one cares that Mega Man Soccer was, I actually don't know if that was a good game or bad game, but let's pretend it was a travesty. Mega Man Soccer for the SNES, I don't think I'm making that up. If that exists and it's horrible, does that make Mega Man 1 or rather Mega Man 2 or Mega Man X worse?
No, I don't think so. That's a good point.
But that is also maybe just due to the fact you have that many games. It's easy to forgive like half of them even.
I think maybe the premise behind this comment that had me thinking was in a game like Bloodborne or really like any of the From Software games that I've played, when I think about it, all of them have been like I've enjoyed each one of them for different reasons. But for people who are just like trying to, I don't want to say chase, but like return to the high that was the experience of playing the original game and finding that the sequel falls short or doesn't satisfy the same itch, especially when they're pursuing something as like tricky and corrosive as nostalgia, because nostalgia, like, it colors our expectations and our perceptions, I think, in a negative way more often than not, because nostalgia is a sensation that can only come from like something that we've enjoyed greatly in the past, but had a long enough detachment from to like aggrandize in our own mind, right? Dark Souls 1 is an amazing game. It's really not that good looking by today's standards, and its remake or its remaster, for instance, is like proof that even if you give it, did they say that they were able to achieve like 4K graphics on certain textures and whatnot? Even if you improve how it looks graphically, like it was a good looking game for its time. It looks pretty clunky by today's standards. But we will always remember it as being beautiful and really good looking. The gameplay as well, like the experiences are going to be there's nothing that's going to beat the first time you fight Sif, and now when you fight a giant rat in Dark Souls 2 that has the same moveset as Sif, to an extent, it's sort of disappointing. It's reminiscent in a way that you may appreciate the fight somewhat, but you're also fighting a giant rat and not a wolf with a sword that has like that is steeped in like background or history within the game. So I was just thinking about how in order to preserve our appreciation of Bloodborne and avoid disappointment with a follow-up game, is it better that there just isn't a Bloodborne 2 and a new IP is introduced?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's conflicting because I would love to play more Bloodborne.
Well, let's apply that to something that is very topical and no longer in theory, but a remake of a masterpiece, Resident Evil 2.
A game that both of us played over this last week. At least I played the 30-minute one-shot demo, which I assume is the same thing you did.
So, yeah, I played it twice. I played it once on PC, once on PlayStation 4. And I actually played it the week before, and I just forgot to talk about it, despite it being maybe the highlight of that week in terms of gaming. Before I say anything, did you ever think, and I'm just assuming you had a similar experience to me, but did you ever think zombies would be interesting again in a video game?
No. That's not true. The Last of Us is about the only franchise I trust to handle zombies in any interesting way. And even then, it is The Last of Us uses zombies in order to force us to reflect more on the dangers and relationships that other humans have with one another more than the zombies actually matter. They're a set piece to isolate and make humans more desperate and pull out the darker and lighter sides of humanity in the narrative of The Last of Us. And I think that's why I liked it so much, because ultimately after playing that game you realize that the biggest threat is not the zombies themselves most of the time. It's the other humans you meet, and they're also your biggest allies or support.
They also had some interesting takes on, I know they're not technically classic zombies because they're more like fungi monsters, but they had an interesting take on enemies that were sight-based and then others that are hearing-based or...
Yeah. So that's the only zombie I've encountered probably in the last decade in gaming that I'm like, this is very cool. I like this concept. I haven't gotten bored of this enemy type, even though it's the same basic principle. Sometimes they're hoarding. You're trying to avoid them for the most part. But when shit hits the fan, you're just unloading firepower and trying to get out of the conflict as soon as possible.
So how do you feel about Resident Evil 2 zombies, which are the only enemies you end up facing in the one-shot demo?
Right. I have never played Resident Evil 2 before. The only Resident Evil game I've ever completed start to finish was 4, and I played about half of 5 and didn't enjoy that a huge amount. And so I just kind of quit in the middle. In Resident Evil 4... And I'm gonna tie this back into the zombie experience. I think I learned, unfortunately, too close to the end of Resident Evil 2.
Or 4?
Too close to the end of the Resident Evil 2 demo, I should say.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. In Resident Evil 4, I felt equipped for the most part to kill every zombie I encountered. Sometimes it got really close and I was short on ammo and using my knife and using the environment quite a bit, but at the end of the day I felt like I was equipped to deal with killing any threat that I encountered if I had enough patience and quick thinking. Resident Evil 2's remake made me feel as though I never had enough ammo or equipment to do anything. I don't think that there is any sort of melee engage that could occur with these zombies, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but because of that, I avoided any sort of close contact with them and found myself getting swarmed or overrun by just 2 zombies at once at any given time. 1 was enough for me to try and handle, that 2 were just a very present threat. And because of the controls and the sway of their heads, headshots were relatively difficult to land, and I couldn't actually tell when they were dead. And I feel like I wasted a lot of bullets. I missed a lot of bullets. I got brought down to low health on several occasions, and I realized very close to the end of this demo that maybe the best thing would have been to incapacitate or slow down the zombie and just get away from it versus actually kill each zombie I encountered.
Mind if I interject for a second?
Absolutely.
it's funny because I entered the game with the mindset of Resident Evil 2 classic, if you will, or original, and Resident Evil 1's remake as well, or remaster kind of.
Right, which I haven't played.
I guess it's a remake or a remaster. And the mentality behind the original Resident Evil games is that, you're going to have a limited amount of ammo, and especially on your first time through, like if I had knowledge of the game, of that idea prior to playing the game, actually, it would have kind of went like it did this time, which is I tried to avoid shooting anything to begin with, and I immediately found out that a lot of the wall creeping and like wall juking, if you will, like let's say you have a hallway and you lure the zombie to the left side, his right or her right. I'm not going to assume it's gender. That zombie
Isn't your gender just zombie at that point?
Yeah, I guess so. Undead gender. I mean, who knows? Maybe they want to identify as living dead. There's definitely some politics in there that I don't think we are equipped to handle. But they, I should say, excuse me, they will inevitably go to the same side of the hallway as you. And so it becomes kind of second nature to lead them to that side of the hallway as you're about to run past them, and then immediately juke when you get close enough, and the zombie will not be able to turn fast enough or get you fast enough. And the hallways in Resident Evil 1 and 2 were designed in such a way that you could usually do that with relative ease once you got that mechanic down. I tried doing that immediately within 2, and I'm immediately awakened to zombie bites. So the game's engine definitely, and I would try to do that later on too, and usually I ended up getting caught by that tomfoolery. So the problem that they had going into Resident Evil 2, in my opinion at least, is that they have a game that really didn't encourage you, as you played more and more of it and mastered the game, to actually dispatch of zombies. And mixing that with the fact that you have Resident Evil 4, or essentially that type of gameplay in the remake, and that it's over-the-shoulder shooting, you're going to have a player or a character that is going to be much better at shooting, and you're going to be able to aim at heads, at legs, a lot more like control over Leon or Claire, and in doing so, empowering the character more. So how do we combat that? And I found that they, at least so far in the demo, have been really effective in doing that through 2 different ways. The first one is just making the zombie more capable. Like you can't just swaying and lumbering and lunging. Yeah, it's pretty much instead of shuffling, like sort of dancing towards you in a way to coax you to fire so it can move out of the way seconds before you actually, or I guess not seconds, milliseconds before you hit the trigger button and fire into an empty space. And they kind of did this in 7 with the molded enemies, the molded, infected, whatever they're called, and that they also had some attacks that would greatly exaggerate what you'd expect their range to be. The zombies in this case don't necessarily have that, but they're not pushovers. Like in 7, you could run past molded enemies upon staggering them and such. In this game, it seems like they take the second step of the equation, which is to greatly keep you guessing at what the zombie is going to do. So I'm not saying this is going to last the entire playthrough of the game, or an entire typical playthrough of the game, but it seems like there's a number of, we'll say, personalities or move sets that the zombies have, and even within a single move set or personality, that zombie also is prone to like sporadic movements that are not unlike being a corpse, if you will. So it'll occasionally have a short burst of movement, a lunge, if you will, even if it's a little further away. It tends to be kind of sporadic and unpredictable, again, upon first impressions. And I think those 2 factors together really make the typical zombie enemy, or like something to actually be frightful of or concerned about. Well, because the individual zombie is finally threatening, right? This is what Resident Evil has done really well in
in just demonstrating this demo, I've played a lot of zombie games, and the threat of 4 or 5 zombies to deal with is normally enough to get a player flustered because it's, oh, I have 5 slow-moving targets, but if I don't deal with each one of them's finally going to get through and take me down. And in this game, I'm like, oh shit, a single zombie is terrifying because I can't hit this guy, and he's covered half of this hallway on his way to me. It's dealing with the numbers issue that I think exists in a lot of zombie games, and they're doing it by giving it a more intelligent AI or move set to cycle through or randomly choose from, versus just adding a bunch of very like generic and stagnant types of AI opponents that only really execute one method but do so en masse to apply pressure.
There's 2 additional things that come into play here. The first one's kind of building off of that sporadic AI, we'll call it, or the sporadic moveset.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, like, 1 zombie still, if you have enough room, would be enough if you can time it well, which I'm assuming that'll be a skill that you'll get down pretty well as you play through the game. You stagger it by hitting it anywhere, and you run past it. There's a point, like, the second zombie encounter, or at least for me in the demo, is 2 zombies coming out of into a hallway.
Mm-hmm.
I found that I could not stagger both of them and run past. I ended up getting caught at that point. So that already like diversifies the typical run by stagger and run experience that you could do in 4 pretty often. You also don't have like stagger roundhouse kicks. Apparently Leon as a cadet does not have that ability yet. In 4 he will. But more notably, the idea of unpredictability is further established by the fact that you don't know when a zombie is actually dead or not. And maybe they're never dead. I didn't really stick around and experiment long enough to know. But you put 8 bullets in and it falls down, and it can eventually get back up, I think.
But it's down for a while. I'm actually not sure if I tested this as robustly as I'd like to, but I can say if you have a zombie that you unload 5 or 6 headshots into, their head can explode, and at that point I considered them neutralized or non-combatants. The only problem is you don't find enough ammo to do that to every zombie. If you land every single headshot with every zombie you encounter, I still think you run out of ammo before you kill all the zombies.
Yeah, I think there is a level of RNG involved too with those headshots, because by nature of, the mindset I have is that, okay, we know what happened in Resident Evil 1's remaster/remake. For any zombie that was still quote unquote intact later on in the game, if you kill them, assumingly, later on in the game, they come back as Crimson Heads. And that makes it even harder. So you either had to set them on fire, which we so far don't have any access to, or blow their heads off with a shotgun or a lucky handgun round. So I was only essentially trying to do headshots, and I found that it was kind of like a coin flip, or maybe even like it's around those odds, but maybe more in the favor of their head staying intact despite the repeated headshots. It seemed like I would down them for a good while before their heads would blow up. I'm curious if I went over and just started unloading into their heads at that point in time, if I could get them to blow up. Their heads to blow up. It's such a weird phrase, blow up their heads, decapitate them. But
it's more like a dice roll odds-wise. And I feel like, I feel like with the zombies that I tested this on, it wasn't also unloading the clip either. It was speculative headshot, wait a second, see him groan, speculative headshot. This is the problem that I also wasted my 30 minutes on just trying to determine how to kill a zombie instead of progressing forward. I really like the time limit, if only to pressure me to make it through the environment. It's like, oh, this is scary, and I'm going to encounter something that's going to threaten my character's life, and a game over is going to take more time than just like successfully navigating this cautiously. But I also have a time limit on my back, so I pushed through a couple situations that I think I would have been more reticent to do, or I would have done more exploring had I not had a little achievement timer telling me that 5, 10, 15 minutes had ticked by. And by the end of it, when it hit 25 minutes, I was just like, okay, I'm just sprinting through this. Like, I just got to see everything that's left before it's over.
I forgot to note, I also thought they gave like maybe more ammo than I expected, because by the end of the demo, I probably still had, or by the end of the 30 minutes, I probably still had like 40 bullets left.
I had almost nothing left.
So definitely goes to show you like the difference in our play styles. I feel like using any substantial amount of ammo is a bad idea, because like as you can tell as you go through the different environments, especially the first part, you get introduced to the mechanic, which is zombies will probably not take damage or wake up until certain points in the story happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's going to be a recurring thing, but it probably will be a recurring thing. I also am not, when I think about it now, in Resident Evil 4, you had the tentacle monster zombies that would pop up when you pop someone's head.
Yeah.
I wonder if that we might be like in for some sort of surprise in Resident Evil 2 in this remake. I'm already not looking forward to Lickers, which going back to The Last of Us, the Licker is a blind enemy. It assumedly just navigates and finds its victims through hearing and maybe scent.
Mm-hmm.
They also, I mean, like the whole idea is they don't have eyes because the brain has outgrown the entire skull, right?
Yeah.
So you also don't see a nose as far as I remember. So maybe it's just off of the taste of the air. They can taste you. It's kind of gross to think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say aside from the fact that that looks really good. Even on PlayStation 4 non-pro, I even had like a sick to my stomach moment when Leon lifts the officer's head that is slouched in a wall.
Yeah, and it's peeling away.
Yeah, you can tell like the jaw, there's something wrong with the jaw or mouth. And my gut instinct was that it's going to fall off as soon as you lift the head, and that'll be that. But it's much worse. It just stretches more and more.
It's very sinewy. Yeah, that was definitely a stomach turning moment. I enjoyed it, but I was also super disturbed by it.
Yeah.
The preview at the very end, or I guess like ending trailer, because they present you with the trailer once your time's up. It looks like the usual, I don't want to call it trashy, but like Resident Evil has always had a very like supernatural or surreal take to it. In a sense, it's a zombie game, so it's probably unfair of me to be too critical about anything that is permitting zombies into the world from not being realistic enough. But the action in Resident Evil actually always seems to surprise me, because I think of the experience, especially early on, being full of dread and sort of a mundane threat of like death, evolving later and later into these, like when I remember Resident Evil 4, boss fights in a burning barn to a giant monster in a castle. That like Resident Evil always jumps the shark, and I think it's something that people like about that particular series, and it's something I enjoyed in Resident Evil 4. But every single time I see it, it always, for whatever reason, just gets me, and I think this is bad storytelling, but and it's campy and it's silly, but it's also kind of what I like about it too. And so seeing the preview, I turned to Sierra after I finished it, and I was just like, this game's going to be hot trash, and I'm very excited to play it.
I could be wrong, but I think Resident Evil was inspired by Evil Dead.
Right, which is also campy in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could call it trash and be happy with it. Like, there's all sorts of trashy things that everyone loves, so it's not like I'm trying to badmouth it. It's just that's what it is. The one thing that I noticed, and I want to say something good before I say the bad part.
Okay.
I think the voice acting is actually perfect so far.
Yeah, I really liked it a lot.
And like, you might be like, well, Neil, Leon and Claire both sound a little like comical. Well, you probably wouldn't, because you also recognize that like their voices are actually great for that campiness, you know?
Exactly.
Their voice acting is perfect. It's like the type of voice acting that you can tell they obviously are accurately portraying their emotions. So you know if he's upset or excited or mad. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, this is Resident Evil.
I think it's the same voice acting quality that we expect from like a general anime dub.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And to say like I want to say that's better than original Resident Evil 1 and 2 voice acting, because those were like just bad at times. These are on, in my opinion. They're serious enough, but not too serious. Now, for the thing that did bug me watching the trailer, and again, this is maybe just me being an audio guy, but how the hell, and this happens in Catherine as well, speaking of which, but how the hell do people say all of these types of syllables with their teeth showing all the time like this? Like, you wouldn't talk with your teeth exposed like this and still sound normal, and yet they do it in both of these games. And I can understand it. I can kind of understand it with the fact that they were probably lip syncing off of Japanese. Maybe that's not the case in Resident Evil, or maybe they change it slightly. I'm not sure. I actually don't know at all what the lip sync thing is like, if that actually adjusts to the script. But when you factor in that Japanese doesn't have that many syllables where your lips do not close, I guess.
Yeah.
Like the majority of syllables in Japanese involve your lips closing to produce those sounds. So I still don't understand why Claire is talking with her lips wide open, full sentences at a time.
It's because nowhere in the script are they going to say the word mimosa to, break the immersion.
Mimosa.
See? I can promise you that word will not be in Resident Evil 2. I didn't even notice that, and now unfortunately I will notice it every time I play.
I think the only reason I do is because the teeth are so like they stand out so much, because there's still like a degree of disconnect I have between the rest of the character artwork and the teeth, at least in that particular scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because they're perfect or anything either. It's just like they just stand out in ways that that you sometimes encounter in games where the graphics are so good in certain respects, but then in other respects you're like, that just looks fake as fuck. But do not let me actually portray the idea that this actually worsened my experience. It was just something that caught my attention in like a Shenmue no expression sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
That was really fun demo, and I'm kind of torn between playing on PC and PS4. Since I played the demo twice, I think it actually felt better in certain respects playing it on the PlayStation, just in general. Like I like having the big screen option and all that stuff that you would normally consider with a console. And it kind of felt better not being able to have pinpoint accuracy with a mouse. I don't know if you understand that, but
I used a controller on the computer, and so I didn't have the pinpoint accuracy of a mouse. And I can see how that could be, I don't know. I guess I haven't played many games like Resident Evil with a mouse, entirely because I think the movement is normally really clunky, or it's obtrusive to the immersion and the experience in the way a controller is not.
Oh, and you mean like WASD for movement?
Yeah. It's the keyboard movement that sucks, not the mouse accuracy that makes me default to using a controller on a game in which I could have more accuracy with the mouse, but feel like I'm much clumsier in the actual mobility of my character.
So you'll probably get it on PC. You should tell me like what you feel about mouse shooting, because now I'm just kind of genuinely curious when it comes out.
I really only mouse shoot in first-person shooters, though. Like, I don't play third-person games with keyboard and mouse ever. And
it feels weird, too, in the regards of just, like, being able to so quickly maneuver straight to headshots. It feels almost unfair at times.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, if I were watching myself, part of my rationale is that, like, I'll be playing with Tiffany. Likely she'll be watching me play. We might trade off at times, like we did with Resident Evil 7. But I don't necessarily know if it looks as good having really jerky mouse movement, really quick jerky mouse movement, especially because I have mouse smoothing or mouse acceleration, whichever term you prefer, turned off. So it's like very jaggedy movements. It's like, this guy obviously plays League of Legends, that sort of approach, or real-time strategy games.
Yeah.
Oh, that comes out this Friday, right?
Let me look into it. I had something else open on the Steam store.
It comes
I guess
out
I can Google it.
on, the 25th. So we're 5 days out from it.
Oh, shoot. Am I going to buy that? Or am I going to buy Ace Combat 7, Skies Unknown, which is released for console but doesn't come out on the PC until the 31st?
Have you been playing that in some form before?
No, but I've played every Ace Combat since Ace Combat 4. And I don't know what exactly it is about piloting aircraft in a video, like, I guess, pilot simulator video games, but I love them. They're so much fun, and I really have never lost my zeal for flying a plane. And Ace Combat has satisfied that, no matter how good or bad their games have been. Ace Combat 5 is honestly, I think, it'd definitely be in my top 5 PlayStation 2 games of all time. And I'm trying to think. Ace Combat 0 was relatively fun as well. Ace Combat 6 was not very good at all, but I still played a lot of that game anyway. And so I'm kind of expecting, if Ace Combat 7 is middling in its receival or reviews to good, I definitely want to pick it up because it's been a very long time since Ace Combat 6 came out. It's got to be like 7 or 8 years now. I'm going to fact check that really quick. And every once in a while, they have a really good story. I thought the story for Ace Combat 5 was really phenomenal. The last Ace Combat game to release was 11 years ago in 2007.
Can you tell me what Ace Combat story is like? Because I imagine it's not plane A and plane B meet and become friends and have to fight off the Nazis.
That's Ace Combat 0, more or less. But Ace Combat stories... Ace Combat 5, for instance, the Unsung War, you play as a group of rookie fighter pilots in a nation that is under attack by its neighboring superpower or whatever. And,
fictional?
Fictional. It's always fictional, but they normally try and replicate like an area of the world. And so I think it was like the Balkans that they modeled that after. In Ace Combat 5, though that game's from 2004, and probably the last time I played it was the mid 2000s, so my memory might be a little hazy. But you play as them, where the initial probably 10 missions or so are you learning to fly and then dealing with an unexpected strike from this rival nation, and then having to be on, like, you're then ultimately on the run as you're like the remaining air force of your nation under attack, and work with a rebel force to essentially beat back your oppressors. I'm trying to see what the countries, Osea and Yuktobania. OC and Yuktobania are the two countries, and so you belong to OC and Yuktobania. invade your territory and essentially put you on the run. Let's see.
So is it like cutscenes outside of combat, obviously, of you on the ground?
Yeah, lots of cutscenes. A relatively like a story that you would expect to be written at least up to snuff with your standard Tom Clancy dime novel. But Ace Combat 5 happened to have a particularly good storyline in which you were, while you're on the run and you are the like remnant Air Force, you are also believed to be shot down at an earlier point in the game after you begin on the run. So you become this folk hero group of like phantom pilots, essentially, referenced or in reference to a fictional character from like OC folklore called the Rosgrees, if I remember correctly. And so as you and your Phantom Pilot team then work to not only further the rebel cause, you kind of cement your prowess as aces in the in like a historical context with the nation that is being subjugated, OC, by Euctobania. And so it's this really interesting and exciting narrative of both growth from rookie pilots into legends, while you're also working to liberate your homeland. I think every single Ace Combat, you operate at least in some sense as the non-aggressive party or the recipient of an aggressive attack from a allied or neighboring nation. And so that never really changes in these games, but that particular narrative take was very good. You go on a rescue mission to save your instructor later in the game, and all of these are normally accented by the opposing military having one or two like super weapons that they plan to unleash that your Air Force in the nick of time like comes in to destroy. And so I think the overwhelming loneliness that you feel in this game that they're able to capture in a game where all of the gameplay is just flying in a plane is a really impressive narrative tie into what is otherwise an arcade like flight fighter pilot simulator. There's also it also has some really cool mission segments where you play like non-hostile missions, or where you're essentially being tailed, but you're not flying a fighter jet, but instead like a commercial plane trying to escape an airspace. Very good all around. I would highly recommend the game even to this day, because ultimately, like racing games, rendering a vehicle like a plane and mostly a sky and ground with certain land features is very easy to do graphically. And so these games don't age very quickly at all. But yeah, Ace Combat 5 will have me forever hyped for whatever Ace Combat comes next.
Have you convinced yourself to go that route instead of RE2?
I mean, I could just buy both.
You could.
Yeah. As I demonstrated with my subscription earlier, I'm rolling in the money. But unfortunately, it'll once again disappoint Cuki that I've invested it into not getting PlayStation Online, especially with Monster Hunter releasing new content. They have some sort of big event that's coming up, or maybe it's a DLC. I cannot remember which, but Cuki will have he'll be in the know when we go to record next week with him.
I wonder if I'll ever play Monster Hunter World. That was one game that I basically told myself I'd wait until the PC release. Then the PC release happened, and there were enough mixed reviews that I decided to hold off until it got better, and now new games are out instead.
I don't know if I would buy it now with the knowledge that I have
of what the game is.
Series, yeah, it's not completely for me. Really, it's I guess it's tricky when you go to buy a game and it is. This is actually exactly my relationship with Ace Combat. Is sometimes there are games that have a particular type of gameplay that is relatively unique to them, that gives it a very dedicated and supportive fan base. And when you see those games and people very excited about them, it excites you. But that doesn't mean that it will necessarily satisfy what you're looking for in a gameplay experience. And I feel like Monster Hunter sort of lacks excitement, and the amount of just like sheer planning and knowledge of mechanics is daunting enough that I don't feel invested enough to learn it, and therefore don't find it a particularly like enjoyable experience anytime. I would much rather just play a different game that has you fighting against like large bosses frequently and managing equipment in a way that's more familiar to me, which is, of course, a From Software game. So,
does that cap off your gameplay experiences this week?
For the most part. I guess I should add that Ace Combat does allow some narrative decision in almost all of their games that is normally boiled down to a midway chapter in which there are two missions you can take, and sometimes you choose to take one or the other that puts you right back onto the same path if you complete that mission, or you can do a coin flip. And therefore, a campaign that has, say, 21 missions, there's a 10A and a 10B, and so you have to play the game twice to experience the other one.
Is it like a clear good and bad path, or is it more along the lines of
just like,
chaos?
Do you want to do... No, it's even more simple than that. It's like, do you want to do a mission that's mostly aerial, or do you want to do a mission that has a lot of ground enemies? Or sometimes it's like, do you want to do land or sea? And they ask you once, and you get to make that choice once. Sometimes twice.
And then it ends up just guiding you down that specific route.
Because the story doesn't change, but it's like... You run joint operations, and sometimes one person on your team goes and does that thing, and you do the other, or like your team splits and you have half your team go this way, half your team go that way, and reconverge at the next chapter, regardless of which one you chose to do.
Well, so we do not have any emails this week, but please send them in to podcast@fancyramen.com if you have comments, questions, or corrections. We always love hearing from you guys. We greatly appreciate any word of advice you guys have too.
Oh yeah, Cookie's gone. So please remember to leave a like and review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, whether it's Apple iTunes or something else. And then also, if you could leave a review with your friends, let them know about the podcast. Let them know that we no longer take emails and convert them to spam instantaneously. And would love their participation.
So that does it for this episode of Fancy Ramen, episode 103. I'm Neil.
I'm Scott, and we'll see you for 104.
You know what? I forgot to mention before. I'm going to cut this into the start. Cuki is out on unofficial assignment. Official assignment? He's been very proactive.
He assigned himself, yeah.
Yeah. That is official assignment, just assigned by himself.
Yeah, Cookie's on official assignment at PAX South right now, and that's why he isn't recording in today's episode. But he'll be back with some exclusive on-the-ground information and interview material for episode 104.
Which is very cool. Hope you're doing well. Safe travels, Cuki.
Yeah, best of luck to you.
And then the ever always phrase, have a good week, everyone.
Bye.